In 3 weeks, we'll be covering the NFL draft, but many of you are wondering, will the Bengals trade up, or what do they have to do to get better at drafting offensive linemen? We'll answer those questions in this week's mailbag.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Together, we're the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. So hit the follow button on your audio platforms, hit subscribe on YouTube if you want us delivered to your eyes and ears first thing every day. And we appreciate you making us your first listen. James, we're going to dive into a mailbag as we do on weekends in the off season. Just 3 weeks away. Can you believe 3 weeks away from the NFL draft? The off season
Oh,
simultaneously at a snail's pace and at a breakneck pace all at once.
yep. That's the beauty of going to the Super Bowl, right? I'm looking up, I'm like, my goodness, off-season workouts are right after the draft. Everything's looming, and the Bengals holding workouts later than every other team. But yeah, the off-season doesn't wait for anyone, my friend. So 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks, if you're listening to this on Friday, the countdown officially on.
Crazy stuff. And you're right. The Bengals, we didn't even talk about that. The Bengals holding their off-season program later than everyone else and even later than the Rams, who were also in the Super Bowl. And Zach Taylor last year canceled mandatory minicamp. Am I remembering that correctly?
No, they all came up. They ended it early, but they all came up.
Canceled a day
They
of
all came up
mandatory
early
minicamp.
because they were there for voluntary, everybody on the
That's right.
roster. And so they let them out early.
They let him out early.
Which worked out.
It did. And at the time, we were like, you really think you're good enough to skip a day? But Zach Taylor, to his credit, has been great with load management. None of you asked about this, though, so let's dive in to your questions in the mailbag. Nobody right now cares, Jake, and I guess also James, about what the Bengals did last offseason in their offseason program. But what many of you seem to care about, and we picked Ben Nicholas's question at N Schneiders21 on Twitter. A lot of you asked about trading up. And Ben Nicholas asked, is it just me or does it feel like this is the year the Bengals finally trade up to get one of their top targets? Why wait when there are fewer roster holes than maybe ever before?
Maybe, right? And I understand that because there are glaring ones that you really want to address. And whether you feel like it's left guard or you feel like it's cornerback, those are the two that everyone's focused on. But it's not just those two. And so let's start there. Are we sure there aren't holes? Because I think wide receivers a need. I think tight ends a need, and not necessarily in that order. Both needs. Edge rushers a need. We've talked about 3-tech. So now I just named 5, 6 positions. And in the Bengals, they've addressed their biggest weakness, offensive line, but there's still a potential hole there. And when you're drafting 30th, to Nick's point, I would assume it's Nick. It's hard to know what's there. And so, yeah, from a draft standpoint, would you love to be able to move up and get your guy and get this instant plug and play starter? Absolutely. But I know you have the history and you're going to go over the history, Jake. I don't see it happening. I can't remember the last time. And I think maybe it's just been once in the first round. Have they moved up? They've moved down. They moved down with Kevin Zeitler and David DeCastro. They'll move down potentially. But when you're drafting 31st, it's basically a second round pick. And we've watched them 2 out of the past 3 drafts trade down in the second round. I think that's the 31st pick this year. So trade up. It's sexy. It sounds good. I'll throw on my hot take chain and love the idea of, Sauce Gardner, as everyone throws out, especially on YouTube, man. They're like, man, trade up for Sauce. Well, that ain't happening, man. That dude's a top 5 pick. Derek Stingley's going to go in the top 12 probably. It's just not going to happen. So I would be surprised if they move up. That being said, you look at a lot of mocks, and a lot of their targets could go 27th, 28th, 26th. So I get why fans would want them to be aggressive and potentially move up. And I'm not saying they won't entertain it. I would just be surprised if it actually happens.
Yeah, I agree with that, James. And to me, there's one reason you might think they could move up this year. Maybe this is a year. And I don't think it's because there are fewer roster holes than ever before. I actually don't buy that at all. At all. I think that they've probably had more complete teams in the past, and you named some holes. And this year's draft really doesn't line up super well with some of those future needs that we would like to see them address. So, for one, I think there's like three techs in this entire draft. Everyone else is either a tweener or a nose tackle. There's maybe two free safeties in this entire draft. And obviously, I'm embellishing a little bit here, but you get the idea. There's nobody that's going to be, or there are very few players that could be instant impact players at these positions, or next year at these positions if they want to find a Jesse Bates replacement, for example, if they don't think they can get that deal done. And then beyond that, as you mentioned, James, tight end, a wide receiver for the future, a left guard. You could argue that they need a linebacker to fill in for Jermaine Pratt if they don't plan on retaining him, and he's an extension candidate this year. And if they don't do that extension and they draft a linebacker in the first 3 rounds, that might tell you where they're at on Jermaine Pratt's future. Of course, there are other linebackers on the roster, but the point is, I think that their list of needs is fairly average compared to previous years, maybe one or two fewer needs than they've had in the past. But you're right. The history for the Bengals trading up is one, short, and B, one and B, not that promising. These are the players that I was able to find that they've traded up for in recent-ish history. Maybe there's some that I'm missing here, but Ryan Finley and Michael Jordan, both in the 4th round of the same draft. Neither of those went all that well.
No.
Brandon Wilson, who's been a fine player. It was a trade up, I think, in the 6th round, late in the 6th round. They traded their later 6th and the 7th round pick to go get Brandon Wilson. Russell Bodine, they moved up to get him in the 4th round. Matt Schobel, the tight end, going way back at this point, and Kajana Carter, which is that 1st round trade up you mentioned, James, and Kajana Carter's career marred by injuries, and hard to say what might have been for his career, but needless to say, if they traded up for a running back in this day and age, we would kill them for it. So looking back, their trade-ups haven't really worked out, which maybe is why they don't do it very often, and is part of why I don't expect them to do it now. But like I said, the reason that you might see them do it is because we've never seen them draft this late either. And so maybe they feel we're really comfortable in the 20s, but we're not as comfortable at 31. So we want to go get a pick in the 20s. That being said, another reason I don't think they'll do it, James, they only have 8 picks this year. And so they like their picks. They like taking swings. They don't like taking higher swings. And so it would be a real break of character to see a significant trade up in the 1st round.
And also it's just value. Like there would be value in adding an extra 3rd round pick to move down 7 spots versus giving up. Imagine if they had to give up their 3rd to move up 4 spots to get the guy that you want. And it sounds great on paper, right? And it's like, oh man, they got this flashy toy or this, great edge rusher, but having those extra picks is how you can hit on, it just gives you more swings, like you mentioned. And 8 picks is plenty, but just as you were describing that, which trade ups did work? Well, Brandon Wilson worked. I'm fine with that. In fact, if they take their 2 7th round picks and go get a guy they like versus just 2 bodies and move up, let's say it's even 10 spots. That's great, but that's late day 3. Much different, much costlier. The value is much different when you're talking about moving up in the 1st round. So I don't want to completely dismiss it because anything is possible, right? I mean, they've added 3 starting offensive linemen in free agency, but it feels unlikely. But it would be fun for us, especially on draft night. Could you imagine if it's like the Bengals are trading up to 25? It'd be exciting.
Yeah, but I would also be really skeptical of what they give up. I would. And who knows who they draft when they move up too. Like maybe it's somebody, maybe they trade up and pick Kyler Gordon, who we think is a mid-2nd round grade. I don't know. Trading up.
Oh, look at you being
great.
Negative. That's negative right there. I don't think they would do
but
that.
I'm just saying trading up doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get Sauce Gardner. In fact, it almost certainly doesn't.
Well,
So
Sauce Gardner's
that's all
going
I'm saying.
fourth to the Jets. Like
You get
worst
the
case.
idea, though. You get the idea. Like the specific player aside, it's probably not going to be for your favorite player in the draft. The
Yeah.
Bengals tend to think differently than you. And as you said, and I think I said, we know historically having more picks in the draft and more swings is what leads to more success because the draft is such a crapshoot. And speaking of crapshoots, maybe the Bengals will finally roll some numbers on those dice that are in their favor on the offensive line where they've really struggled to draft lately and need to get better. We'll answer that question and more coming up next.
BetOnline is your number one spot for all things sports wagering. Ready or not? Well, baseball season is here, and your one-stop shop for all of those wagering needs, whether it's player props, whether it's season odds, division odds, is BetOnline. NBA playoffs are here as well. I'm rocking a little NBA Jam shirt with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. Maybe the Warriors make a little bit of a run. Sorry, LeBron James fans, you're on the outside looking in of the playoffs, but that doesn't mean you can't wager at BetOnline. It is easy to use. You can sign up using your mobile device today, your laptop, your PC. I use them. You should too. Check them out. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
Are you watching the Reds this year, James?
I'll pay attention a little bit for sure. The odds are I only went to a couple games last year. I'm not going to go out of my way to go to a bunch of games, given that
I'm gonna.
they didn't go out of their way to address. It would be like if the Bengals were like, nah, we're good offensive line wise. Well, what?
And
But
also, we can't afford to pay the decent players that got us to the playoffs last year. So, see you, DJ Reader. See you,
2
Jesse
years.
Bates.
Last year for the Bengals. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It's wild times we live in. That's why I declared on Thursday's show when you were, and I know you know this, but
I do.
declared it. It's officially a football town in Cincinnati, and
So
I don't
that's
think a
why
lot
I'm
of Reds fans. I don't know if a lot of Reds fans were on board with that, but it is officially official because literally Joe Burrow's the headliner of Reds opening day. Think about
exactly.
that.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I'm going to watch
Oh.
a Reds game tonight until Joe Burrow's not on the field anymore.
Well, it won't be tonight. It won't be tonight.
Oh, it's not tonight?
Tonight is in Atlanta. So Thursday night's game is in Atlanta. Yeah, that's the thing. Is opening day isn't until next week because of the
The
lockout.
Reds are opening on the road?
Because of the lockout. Yeah, everything's delayed. Yep.
What a mess. What a mess. Next question, James in the mailbag, Brendan Haas or Hayes, I'm not sure. I don't remember. Sorry, Brendan, wants to know, is getting better at drafting offensive line required to sustain success over time, especially with some of the big contracts the Bengals have coming up? And if so, well, what do the Bengals have to do different to figure it out?
A couple things. And I actually think they're in a better position this year to hit on offensive line because it has been bad. And Jackson Carman doesn't look promising. Deontay Smith is a fourth rounder. We'll see. And Trey Hill, sixth rounder. Again, that's a big we'll see in all caps and multiple emojis. That being said, Frank Pollock now has worked with this coaching staff for an entire year. It was a weird 1 year, one-off type thing when he was here in 2018. And so now I think Duke Tobin, I think Frank Pollock, I think Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan, they can all be in sync with exactly what Frank Pollock wants, what fits the run game, what fits the pass game, what they need as well. And so I think they're more likely to be able to hit from that perspective. But this is much more than just a get to know Frank Pollock issue. And they do need to solve it. And that's why, again, when I look at 31, in a perfect world, they would find a plug and play lineman that's going to be on a rookie deal that you can have under team control for 5 years because they've struggled there. And yeah, they might have gotten it right in free agency. But to your point, Brendan, it's all about the next couple of years. Burrow's going to get paid. We'll see about T, Jesse, Jamar. You're going to have to get linemen, specifically on the interior where the Bengals, they're still not going to shove out huge money for guards, right? That's not going to be, I don't think that's a precedent-setting deal for Alex Kappa. I think that's all right, we need to fix this now because we have a team that's ready to win. And so, yeah, they have to get it right in the draft, and we'll see if they do. We'll see if the draft breaks their way, and it isn't just the first round. There's a couple centers that could be there in rounds 2 or 3 that they could add, but they certainly have to draft well offensive line-wise and figure it out. And I think Pollock, coming back and, being here for a second season, which he didn't have that go around with this coaching staff and front office, I think that could help.
And I think that it's not just drafting necessarily, it's also developing. I think it's a little bit of both because they've had some draft picks that we haven't agreed with. And I agree, James, like there might be some guys they can get day 2, day 3, and not just center, but also a guard who could contribute. They also might get a guy at 31 they really like. But the the other piece of this, and the reason that they had to spend the money on Alex Kappa, that they probably, frankly, did not want to spend on Alex Kappa and probably did not want to spend on Ted Karras, is because they haven't been able to develop guys since the. I guess Trey Hopkins counts as a guy they developed. He definitely counts, but
Sure.
besides that, the Clint Bowlings and who else?
Andrew Whitworth, Andre Smith. I mean, it's been
Second
that
round
long.
pick, first round pick.
But
I'm
you're
talking about
talking Andrew
developing,
Whitworth
like,
was 16 years ago.
yeah, but he was a second round pick.
Well, they developed him though. I mean, he was awful as a
Sure,
rookie.
but he was, there's a higher expectation for a second round pick than a fourth round pick, and a lot of starting guards and starting interior linemen in the NFL come from the third to fifth
Sure.
round and
Yeah.
and can get developed into passable players in the NFL. The Bengals, and it's not that you do this with every third to fifth round guard you draft. Obviously, like you draft a lot of guys there, and eventually one or two turn into starters. But the Bengals have had no quality starters come from those rounds. Like look at Philly, what Philly's been able to do in terms of lineman development. They turned a seventh rounder into a Pro Bowler.
Mhm.
The Bengals aren't doing that. They haven't done that for a really long time.
And who knows? Maybe Deontay Smith can be that next one or someone like that. But you're right. That's the part of it that really needs to pan out. They have a third offensive line coach now, and so we'll see if Frank, Ben Martin, and I forget the new offensive line coach's name, but he is familiar with Pollock, worked with Pollock in the past. So we'll see if they can get it done. Next question comes from a loyal listener in St. Louis. Lonnie asks, everyone is freaking out this week with the money being paid to wide receiver with the different ways to handle the T. Higgins situation, tag trade extension. What does your gut feeling, and what is your gut feeling on how the Bengals will handle T. Higgins?
And another loyal listener also asked a very similar question. Brian at B Artbo also asked, is it reasonable to think the Bengals might change the way they do business a little bit when these contracts come due? And it wouldn't even be a change of business to keep good wide receivers and good quarterbacks. The Bengals have generally done this, and you can make an argument that Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones got away. You can make an argument as well that the Bengals had a fair offer on the table for Marvin Jones, and he didn't want to be a wide receiver 2 to AJ Green.
Mm-hmm.
So, so sometimes things don't work out. T. Higgins is going to be a free agent when he's 25 years old. I think that there are a lot of reasons that you would want to keep both of those guys if you can. It's going to come down to the money. It's going to come down to the guaranteed money. If the team continues to be successful and T. Higgins is healthy for a couple of years and he and Jamar Chase are a big reason that they're successful, great. But the other trend we're seeing that kind of complicates it more for Higgins than Chase. I think Chase is a very high priority no matter what because he's a game-changing player. T. Higgins is a very good player. And it's getting a little bit easier to find very good players at wide receiver in the draft as increasingly more and more athletes are playing this position coming through high school and going into college. So it's a little bit trickier for T. Higgins. And that's why so many of our listeners, and yourself included, not that you're a listener, James, but you included, want Alec Pierce if the value is right. Or, could I talk you into a George Pickens at a certain time in the draft in the T. Higgins mold of a guy who was injured but highly productive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and so some of the names even in this draft are appealing to Bengals fans. And if they draft a receiver this year, I know they need to probably replace Tyler Boyd here pretty soon because he's probably not coming back again. But maybe, who knows? Can't always predict the future. Maybe they also are looking for a T. Higgins replacement. I'm not sure. I think I don't know if I see them giving $50 million a year to two wide receivers. I just, if that's what it works out to be,
Mm-hmm.
even with the salary cap going up, that's a lot of money to lock up in one position.
Sure. And that's the part of it is they've been good, relatively good at drafting receivers, certainly good at drafting second round receivers. When you look back at Chad Johnson, T. Higgins, and we could go on and on, honestly, about guys that they found in the middle rounds that have been productive. But look, it's a weapons league. That's the difference. That's the shift. And so you can't have enough of them. Is it Alec Pierce? Is it one of these other wide receivers? I don't know, but I would be shocked if they don't draft one in the middle round, say rounds 3 through 5. I would think that they would address the wide receiver position. We'll see what happens with T. Higgins. I think they'll try to keep him, but that is a ways away. So don't press panic, Locked On Bengals listeners. We'll get to more of your questions coming up next. But first, a word from Built Bar, the number one protein bar on the planet. And T. Higgins has had a big couple of seasons. Maybe that's because, well, Built Bar. Maybe it's not. Maybe he doesn't eat Built Bars. I know this. I eat a Built Bar every single day after my workout. You get a protein punch that way. Maybe you're not working out. Maybe you just want a healthy midday snack in between meetings. Built Bar can do that as well. They're covered in 100% chocolate. They taste great. It tastes like a candy bar. That's what's so great about them. They're high in protein, low in sugar, low in calories. Perfect for you, perfect for T. Higgins, perfect for me. So check them out right now at built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your order. Again, to get 15% off the number one protein bar on the planet, use promo code LOCK15 at built.com.
All right, James. We have a lot of questions in this mailbag. I think we've answered 3 so far.
So we can speed through them.
Let's speed it up a little bit. Number 1 in the speed round. I'll ask you, Brian Wood at DangleDump94. Don't want to know what that means. Do you think the Bengals would draft Daxton Hill at pick 31, where we picked him in Mock Draft Monday just this week?
Yeah, it's real easy. Yeah, I think they could certainly consider it. Now, that doesn't mean they would view him as a Jesse Bates replacement right away.
Probably more Von Bell replacement, actually.
And exactly. And a lot of these safeties are that. And Von Bell's entering the last year of his deal as well. So, that's what I would lean, and if he's the best player available, I certainly think that he would be in play at 31. Up next is Mr. Nev. What specifically does Jackson Carman have to do to improve? And it's a two-parter. What are your predictions for most improved on both sides of the ball?
Most
so we can start with Jackson Carman.
I was going to start with most improved because talking about what Jackson Carman has to do to improve is a whole thing. I don't think we have time for it. I think it's a good question. I think there's.
You can give a quick bite-sized thing. You don't have to do it all now, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff that needs to get better. The hand placement needs to get better. The base needs to get better. The mental aspect of his game needs to get better. But there's like a whole film study episode we can do there with Mike at Bengals_Santagata a little bit deeper into the offseason after the draft, I think. I'm more interested in the most improved. My guy on offense, James, is going to be Jonah Williams, going into his 3rd year as a starter, going into the part of his career where he should take a big leap as a guy who had a pretty promising start to his career, but hasn't taken a massive leap yet. On the defensive side of the ball, can I say Joseph Osai? Would that count? You can't say Joseph Osai.
He was hurt. Yeah, that doesn't count. Come on.
I have no candidates on the defensive side of the ball that I think are going to take a massive leap in that case.
Okay. There you go. Wow. All right, fine.
I think they're all pretty good. And
I'm telling Akeem Davis Gaither. I think I'm telling Akeem Davis Gaither, and we'll see. That would be the.
There are guys that could get better. I just think that largely the players they have on defense, mostly veterans too, are kind of who they are at this point.
Sure. And so that would be the one that stands out to me, Akeem Davis Gaither. Obviously Osai. I guess you could say Sample, but I thought he was fine. It's not like he was awful as a rookie. On offense, I'll give you another one. It's my guy. Look, Captain America has never failed. And I think at some point, Chris Evans is about to go crazy. And I don't know when. I don't know what the hell he's got to do. But I think he's going to be much, much better after a year in the league. If they decide to, split him out here and there, run a little, we're going to motion him out of the backfield and put him in the slot and let him go off. Well, then Chris Evans is going to be ready for it. So that would be my candidate on offense.
People were mad at me when I put out my little depth chart with evaluating each player as like All pro, Pro Bowl, good starter, average starter, backup, roster fringe. Because I said Chris Evans had the grade, in my opinion, of an average NFL starting running back. They're like, what, you mean he can't get better? I'm like, man, I think that's pretty good for a guy who hardly played. And that's the thing with him is how does he get on the field? So that'll be an interesting thing to watch next year. Our next question comes from Brian Scott at Brian7673, another frequent flyer here in the Locked On Bengals mailbag. Do the Bengals pick up another offensive lineman or corner before the draft, James?
I think so. And it's probably like 51%, 49%, because ultimately I think they'll probably sign one of each because they have some money and because Quentin Spain's just sitting there, Riley Reif's just sitting there, guys that, they're familiar with that they could just add. Trey Hopkins is just sitting there. But to me, corner. Lou Anarumo, anytime you ask him about defensive back, he's like, you can't have enough of them. I just look, he got here and they went out of their way to draft defense and draft more defense and spend money on defense and spend money on defense. It's not like they didn't add 3 linebackers in the Joe Burrow drafts. I know they hit on their offensive picks at the beginning of each of these past couple of drafts, but they haven't shied away from addressing the defense. I think he's going to be able to win that argument, if there is an argument, right, and get one more defensive back. So if I had to lean one way or the other, I would say corner. But ultimately, I think before camp starts and maybe in the middle of offseason workouts, they had a couple of veterans, one at each position.
My very uninformed gut feeling is that the most likely player for the Bengals to sign next for who isn't like a practice squad type player like the tight end they just signed would be Quentin Spain.
Yeah, it would make sense. It would make sense to bring him back, especially in the reason I think it's going to happen is I think they're going to finalize their board in the next week for the most part. You're always working on it, but finalize it for the most part. And then they're going to go through these mocks and it's like, okay, what are we missing? What are we not going to be able to get in this draft? What's going to be hardest to pull off? And then you address it with one of these free agents that wants to, because if I'm a veteran, I want to link up with the team before the draft versus after. If you're one of these fringe veterans that probably isn't starting anyways. So that's part of it too, especially if you already have a house in Cincinnati and your family's already in Cincinnati, which is Quentin Spain's case, or the case for Quentin Spain.
And you're already working out with your teammates.
Yep. That's another one. All right. We have time for a couple of more here. All right. Did you see this one from Get Up 6? This is a good draft question. George, he spelled it really wrong. Karlaftis. George Karlaftis and Tyler Linderbaum are both sitting there at 31. Who do you take and why? And for those that haven't seen Karlaftis, he went out of Purdue. He went to the Bengals 31 in NFL Network's Peter Schrager's latest mock draft. And he hasn't really fallen that far in a lot of mocks that I've seen. So he falls to the Bengals at 31, the edge rusher. Tyler Linderbaum, who's part of my big 5. Who would you take?
Isn't Karlaftis not part of any big anything because we've just assumed that he would be gone by the early 20s?
Go on. Go on, because you're not wrong.
I mean, I'm asking you.
Yeah, he is not part of that because I assumed that he would be gone. Go ahead.
It's really challenging because of positional value. I think Linderbaum is the better prospect at his position. I think George Karlaftis plays a more valuable position and can make a bigger difference to this team in the next 2 years. So
from the jump, maybe. I mean,
yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like in 2022, in 2023, while they have Karras and Kappa under contract, and hopefully they're still young and healthy and whatnot. Karlaftis gives you a guy who can kick inside, who can rush from the edge, rush inside. They need a guy who can kick inside for those pass rushing downs. Gives you another guy in the rotation if Joseph Osai isn't what you expect him to be, or even if he is, you can't have too many pass rushers. And say they just roll with Eli Apple and they draft an Alante Taylor type, sort of raw, needs a little bit of development corner, but has a lot of athleticism in the 3rd round.
They met with him.
Now, what's that?
They met with Taylor.
Yeah, great. So there you go. Perfect scenario.
I didn't know if you knew that.
So I may or may not have. They start to blur together at some point if you're not looking at a list. But so say Eli Apple's your starting corner. Well, how do you help your corners as you get after the passer and you say, okay, if you're not open in 3 seconds, you're sacked. If you're not open in 2.5 seconds, you're sacked. And if adding Karlaftis and Osai to a unit that already includes Hendrickson and Hubbard and, Akeem Davis-Gaither, if they get him rushing the passer a little bit more, and Mike Hilton coming off the slot blitzes, it gives you another piece who can really help your pass rush. And I think that the Bengals pass rush could use a little bit of consistency. It was productive last year, but it was kind of drought, feast or famine. And so leveling that out a little bit would help. I think the consistency of the defense and Karlaftis, I think, would help that. So there's a whole argument for taking Karlaftis, but Tyler Linderbaum's really good at his position, man.
It's tough.
And it would really help the offensive line. It would stabilize the offensive line for 2 years. You probably don't have to think about it all that much. And maybe it's a deeper draft and you feel like you can get an athletic edge rusher a little bit later like you did with Osai. I don't know. This is hard. This is really hard. I'm going to say Karlaftis because I think you're going to say Linderbaum. And I just gave a great rationale for why I think Karlaftis would potentially make a bigger impact.
Yeah, well, you read wrong. Big Five is about to become a Big Six. If Karlaftis is there, sign me up for a few reasons. One, you can never I just said that Lou talks about not having enough defensive backs. You can't have enough pass rushers. And Trey Hendrickson battled through about 52 back issues, it felt like, last season. And without him on the field, or if he was neutralized, they could not get any heat. That final drive against Matt Stafford, he was begging to be under pressure. If you pressure him a little bit, that dude was going to throw an interception. And because that's what he does. That's what he does with the game on the. Sorry, Matt Stafford. And I get it. I'm being disrespectful, whatever. But they couldn't get heat on him. And so he had 52 seconds to throw. And that's not what you can have in that situation. So what this would do is it would take some pressure off of Joseph Osai. I know he looked promising against Tampa Bay in the couple drives he was on the field. All of that. That's great. Hopefully. And hopefully Hubbard has more juice, and hopefully Hendrickson's healthy for 17 games. And then hopefully Karlaftis just gives you that much more and is a plug and play guy that can help your pass rush as well. And here's why I would say him over Linderbaum. And I don't think Karlaftis is going to be there, but Peter Schrager said it and he's pretty plugged in. So you never know. I think that you could find it if they want to go the center route. And I'm not even sure they do. They might pass on Linderbaum anyway. But if you want to go the center route, I think there might be one there at 63 when you draft. And so that's the part of it where, yeah, you might be able to do both and just go trench player. And then people are really freaking out about corner. But if you're getting heat on opposing quarterbacks, then corner, like you said, it isn't as big of a hole and you aren't as concerned about it. So I would lean Karlaftis today. Now, in a week, will I feel that way? On draft night, will I feel that way? I don't know. But today, take the edge rusher, this guy that is projected to be a top 20 pick anyways, and doesn't have the size concern, like the scary size concerns that people have with Linderbaum. To me, he's not as scary, and there isn't as much risk, I guess, with him.
He doesn't need to be a 1 percentile outlier to be successful in the NFL the way Linderbaum
that's a good
does.
Point. And I think Linderbaum will be that, but still.
Yeah. But that's literally what we're talking about when we talk about risk for Tyler Linderbaum. It's not a tape thing. It's not a technique thing. It's none of that. It's that he would be one of the smallest centers to ever come into the league. Fun tiebreaker here. We both picked Karlaftis. I'm a little bit surprised. Dane Brugler's The Beast draft guide came out as we record today on Thursday. And guess who his 18th and 19th players are?
Wow.
On his top 100 big board. It is
George
Karlaftis at 18 and Tyler Linderbaum at 19.
Look at
there
that.
You go.
Look at that. Well, Dane agrees. Yeah. And by the way, he's going to join us in a couple. He'll be joining us before the draft, guaranteed. We're working out a time.
Very excited.
With Dane Brugler.
I've been reading The Beast, and we got to get out of this show, I know. I've been reading The Beast for 10 years this year. My first email from Dane Brugler was in 2012, in April 2012. So happy 10-year anniversary, Dane.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's been awesome to see him grow. I mean, I remember reading it and paying attention to him draft wise for a long time, and now it's a must for anyone that's covering the draft or paying attention to the draft or wants to learn more about the draft. And it's all you have to do is subscribe to The Athletic to get it. It's pretty simple.
280
there's our
pages.
There's our athletic plug.
There you go.
You're welcome.
little bits on so many players, and I love the biographical stuff too. Like getting, he was a three sport athlete in high school. You're going to get that in the Beast. Anyway,
Mhm.
we'll have Dane on in a little bit here, and that's going to do it for our mailbag. Mock Draft Monday coming your way next as we get more and more educated about who's in this draft and where the fits might be. Hopefully, our mock drafts continue to get better too. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo day and have a good one.